Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to be doing a Photoshop assignment, and it's actually going to be right out of this book right here. I'm using the Photoshop CC Adobe book, that's Classroom in a Book, and this is the 2018, but the 2019 and 2020 versions are almost identical. They have a couple additional things in it, which are sidebars, but the overall way that everything progresses through the chapter is going to be exactly the same. So let's get started. Now, I should say, so before we get started, what you need to do is you need to go online and download all of the assignment images that you're going to use. And the book at the beginning of the book gives you a place where they're located, and you can find them and download them and work and follow along. Now, I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do and explain a few things as I'm going along. Hopefully that will help you out if you decide to go through this book and do each chapter. That might be a good way to learn Photoshop for you. So let's get right into it. So the first thing we have is we have two different files. We have a start PSD file, which is this file right here, and this is the image that you're going to start with. You see that comes with two layers. It comes with a ribbon layer that's off and a rose layer that is on. That's the image. And then the other one is what the end result is going to be, what the image is going to look like at the end. You see that we're going to add a couple layers here and do an adjustment. So that's what we're going to do to make our image look good. So we're going to go back to the start image here. First, when we start in Photoshop, we want to open up these images right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close these images down, and we're going to go ahead and open them back up. And I'm just going to open up the one that we're going to use. Now, because I had already opened them up and closed them, it's actually right here. You can see that the image is here. But if you were opening in the beginning, we're going to go ahead and just open them from the very beginning. Now, I have mine on the desktop, and I have them in Lessons folder. And lesson number 1, this is what you download from the web when you go to get your images. And we have the end PSD and the start. So I'm going to click on the end. I'm going to hold down my shift and click on the start. Then I'm going to open, and these two images will open up, and you see again that it's the same setup that I had before. The end image opens first, and then the start image here. Okay, so our work area consists of the menu bar at the top here, and this is what's right along the top. The very top, it has our files, our edit, image, layers, type, select, filters, 3D, view, windows, and help across the top there. And then we have this option bar, and this option bar across here are options for whatever tool you're using. So right now we're using the move tool. If we click on this tool, you notice that these option bars at the top change. So every tool has its own option bar up at the top there. Now the tools panel is what's along the left side here, and these are various tools that you're going to be using in Photoshop. And if you hover over them just for a little bit, you'll see that it gives you a quick example of how to use these tools, and also allows you to learn how to use more in-depth little tutorial about the tool. So some of these tools have a little arrow next to them, and when you click on that arrow here, when you click and hold on that arrow, and that's a left click and a hold, you're going to have a clone stamp tool, and you have a pattern stamp. So you can select between two. You can see that because we have the square here, that means that we're on the clone stamp tool now. Now also, if you go up here, and let's just take this one here, the polygonal lasso tool. If I click and hold, you see that we have a lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. And you see that we also have an L next to each one of these. So if you're any place and you start pressing the L on the keyboard, if you're any place and you start pressing Shift L on the keyboard, you'll see that we will go through those different lasso tools up there at the top there. So that's just a little quick tip there. Now the other section we have is we have a quick search here in case you need to find something or search for anything in Photoshop. You can do that with a quick search. Along the top there we have a workspace menu, which is this one right here, and you can see that you can click down, you have my workspace, you have the different menus that you're allowed. Right now we're in the essential menu. So we're going to be working from the essential menu, and we can reset the essential. We can actually add different workspaces, which is further along that we'll find that out. Now the other thing that we have here is we have a share button here. And we can share an image button here, and that means that we can share it to Mail, AirDrop, Messenger, add to Lightroom Photos. So you can share these images to different places. And then finally in G we have all of our panels here. And finally we have all of our panels here, which we have different things along these panels. And these panels can all be adjusted and they can all be moved around. And we have adjustments here, we have properties. You see that when I click on the different tabs at the top, they give us different panels that are hidden within the same one. And then the same way down here we have layers, channels, and paths. Now layers are going to be the ones you're going to use the most, and you will use some adjustments, but property is probably the next one to use, because every layer has a property, has a different property to it, or property that can be used. Now here on the layer panel we also have these eyeballs that can be checked on and off, and that allows you to see whatever's on that layer, and also appears over in this section over here or your work area. In this little bar right along here can be expanded to look like similar to this bar, and this is your history panel, is what's saved over here. Or you can click on that and it will drop out whatever panels you have. So you can have a number of panels over here that you can actually work from. And the same thing here, this one I've closed automatically on mine, but you have libraries here, and you can have a couple different ones there that are Photoshop related for the cloud work if you want to use them. So we're going to select tools from the toolbar, and the first one that we're going to work with is going to be our zoom tool. So we go down here and you're going to find a magnifying glass here, and Z is the shortcut key to that, and you can see that it says Z right there. So this is our zoom. So the zoom tool makes it so that we can go in and out of the picture. We can click on it, it's going to zoom in, and if I hold down the option it changes to a minus and it zooms back out. So the Alt option, depending on whether you're using a Mac or PC, will change the way that this tool will work. Also in this tool panel, if you don't like them going all the way down the edge right here, you can actually click on this little tab right here, and this will give it a dual column. Some people like to work, with everything a little bit closer there. And these three little dots down here are to edit the toolbar, so you can actually click on here and add stuff to it if you want to add stuff to the toolbar. And you can see that we can open this edit menu and we can add different tools to it, or subtract tools that we don't use all the time. If there's some tools in there that you just don't want to use or have, you absolutely can do that. Rotating view tool, that might be worth having, but the R is such a quick shortcut that I've never worried about putting it over here. So I'm just going to cancel out of that, but just be aware that that is what these three little dots are right here. I'm actually going to move this back so that it's a single column. That's sort of what I'm used to working on. Now the other thing that's important on this area, now we've talked about most of these menus and panels on this area, but down here is another important one. Oops, went a little bit too low there. So I have doc size here, and you see that when I click on this arrow, that I can change it to document size, document portfolio, scratch size, efficiency, timing. You can change it to a lot of different things. Layer counts, if you have, let's say you have a lot of layers, you're worried about that. I don't know why you would be, but I guess there would be somebody that would be. Most of the time, document size is all that I leave it at. And the document size is going to be the size of the document that you're currently working on. And so I'm just going to leave it on document size here. The other number that we have down here is we have 100%. Right now this image is at 100%. And you see that if I click on my zoom tool here, that we moved that image to 200%. And if I hold down my Alt option and click, I move that down to 100%. Now you can also change the zoom tool up here. You can change it to the minus there, and you can also change it to the plus up here. Both those will work, and we do have some options there. There's no preset for that. Oops, I made that a little bit too big, so I'm going to reset this window by Command 0 and the number pad. That allows us to have the picture at full screen, so it's going to save it or have it open up to take up the maximum real estate on your viewing panel here in this area right here. But we probably want it back down to 100%, so I'm just going to click it one more time with the Alt option pressed and move it down to 100% size. Now if you're wondering, you can go up to 3200%, I believe, and once you get to that point, and you see that every time I click, this change, our percentage changes down here, and also our rulers on the side change. You see that as I get closer to 32, 64, 1280, so you can go 12,800%. So you can see as I click to this large of an area, that we can see all the pixels in the image, and they're, these little square things, and you can see how these pixels are blended together to create that image that we see when it's at 100%. So once you get it all the way to the maximum size, you're going to have to basically go back down to your normal size. I'm just going to click and keep clicking here with the minus and go back down to 100% again. We have what's called a scrubby zoom up at the top here. And what this allows us to do is when you're in the zoom in, is that when you click and you move to the right, we zoom in. And when you click and move to the left, you zoom out. So you can zoom in and out rather quickly with that button there, or with using the scrubby zoom. I don't use it all that often, but it might work out well for you. Now also along the top, you have 100% where you can click automatically. So let's say we had it at this, and we click at 100%, it's going to bring it back down to 100% here. We can tell it to fit the screen, and we can tell it to fill the screen, which means it's going to fill from side to side, top to bottom, however much it needs to do that. So I'm going to bring it back to 100%. Now also, if you hold down the command and 0, that will also fill the screen automatically. Now the other thing that you can do is if you have it rather large and you want to bring it back to fill screen, you can double click on the hand right here, this little hand right here, and that will bring it back down to filling the screen. But once you do that, it does go to the hand tool, which allows you to sort of move things around in the image. Now in this case it's not going to move it around because it's just a single image there, but if it was inside something, you'd be able to move, and you can see hand tool pass over different parts of the image and allows you to move it around. Now there's one other way that you can zoom in and out, and that's with what's called the navigation panel. And so if you come over here, if you don't have it open, what you do is you can go up to Windows and you can go down to Navigation, or Navigator is what it's called, and here's our navigation panel. And let me just bring this out just a little bit bigger so you can see that. So I can actually move back and forth to adjust this image. And let's say I have it this big, I can actually take my cursor and set it up to the center here, and as I move it, it will move around to this image. So this is really useful if you have the image oversized, if you really want to see a lot of detail in it and move the image around. That works. And as I shrink it down, you see that the navigator starts getting to be the full size of the image there. And you can click on the smaller mountains to lower it, and click on the bigger mountains to raise it up. So that's the navigation. That's represented by this navigator, which is looks like a steering wheel on a boat. So the first thing we want to do is we want to add a brightness layer to this rose here to brighten it up and add a little bit of contrast. And we want to make sure that we're clicked on that layer, because when we add another layer, it's always going to put it above the previous layer, the layer that we have selected. So I'm going to go up to adjustments here, and I'm going to go to this first one, which is brightness and contrast. And you see that when I hold the mouse over, it creates a new brightness contrast adjustment layer. I'm going to click on that. I click on the brightness contrast layer, and these are the adjustments that I can make here. Now this layer is going to affect everything below, so it's only going to affect this layer that's right below it. So as I bring my brightness up, you see that the image will automatically brighten up. Now the book wants you to put it around 90, 98, somewhere in that neighborhood. Any place close is fine. You can use your own eye for that adjustment there. And then contrast, when we adjust the contrast to the right, we increase the contrast. You can see that I can increase the contrast quite a bit. And we go to the left, we can make the image dull or flat. So we're going to go ahead and just bring it on up a little bit here, and right around I don't know, 18, 20, right in that area. I think the book wants you to put that at 18, So we're pretty close there. As you can see, these layers allow you to make adjustments on the layer below, which in this case is that photograph. So now that picture looks pretty bright. If we click on our end one, you see that we're pretty close to the same brightness. I mean, when I click back and forth, you see that there's almost no change in the brightness of the image there. So we're pretty close on the brightness. So in order to give yourself some space for your layers here, if you're not using this properties panel adjustments too much, you can actually double click on the tab here, and that's going to close it up to a smaller layer. And whenever you need to use it, you just click on it and it brings it back to where you can make that adjustment again, or use whatever part of that panel you want. So this gives you some real estate here, and sometimes you're going to have a lot of layers and you're going to find that very useful. Now at this point you may want to save your work, and it's a good idea to save work throughout your creative process here, because sometimes you're going to make mistakes. You want to go back a couple steps. So in this particular one, we're going to go ahead and save this file. So I'm going to go up to the file, the top of the file here, and put Save As. And what we want to do is in our lessons here, or in whatever folder that you want to save it to. And in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the lessons folder. And I have it now as Start PSD, which is going to go over the top of this start. And we really don't want to do that. We want to give it another name. So you can name it whatever you like. The book recommends working, so that way you know it's a work in progress. And what I would do, if you want to save different points of time in your image so that you have something to come back to, is to put it as working number one, meaning that's the first one that you save. Working number two, do the second one, third one, so that you have an order there that you can sort of go back, almost like a history, and go back on it. Now do keep in mind that we do have a history tab that we haven't talked about yet, but the history tab will disappear when you do save stuff. It starts at that point once it's saved, but you have that saved item, so you can always go back to that. So we're going to call this working one PSD. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file. You can see right here, and I make sure that the layers are clicked on, which is the only way you can save a Photoshop one anyway. You do want the layers to be saved with it, because the whole idea of saving it has a Photoshop file. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to start and sample a color here. So by default over here, most of the time, and let me click on the default, most of the time the foreground and background color, represented over here by these two squares, is dark or light. Foreground and background color will be black and white. So sometimes we want to change those colors depending on what we're trying to make. Over here in the layers panel, we're going to click on the ribbon, and we're going to click on this eyeball, and these eyeballs make these panels so they're visible. And by clicking on the eyeball here, I make that panel visible. We can see happy birthday right here. Now what we want to do is we want to select the ribbon layer here, because we want to sample from that layer. If we're still on this layer, we would be sampling on that layer, but we want to sample on the ribbon layer. And we're going to select the eyedropper tool from the panel here, which is this one right here. And again, you can just press I as a hotkey for that. Sometimes that's worth remembering. And we're going to click the area inside the happy birthday ribbon to sample that blue color. Now when I'm here and I click, you'll see that the bottom there represents the black, and the top is that blue color that's on that ribbon, and that's what it has selected. And you can see over here that this is the point that it found is where that selection is made on the color used in saturation. And if you look over here now, you can see that the foreground color is made to that blue right there. We've changed that foreground color to blue, which is what we're going to use here in a minute. But before we do that, we want to work with the tools and tool properties, and so we're going to start using the context menu. Okay, so the next part is on context menus, and generally these are the small menus such as right click that give you some options to use. And sometimes some of the tools have little menus that give us options and help explain things. So for here, we're going to select the zoom tool, and I'm going to go over the side here and select the zoom tool. Again, you could have just pushed Z for the same thing. And we're going to hold it over in the bottom third of the image and go ahead and zoom in so that we get a nice clear view of the bottom third of the image. Now, What we want to do is we want to select the rectangle marquee tool in the panel here, the tool panel, the second one down from the top. It's this one right here. And when you select this and you drag, you'll see that there's a number. There's a width and a height number. Notice that mine are in millimeters. So the book says to draw a rectangle marquee tool to create a selection 3/4 inches tall, 2.5 inches wide. Well, I can't very well do that with a metric system there. I mean, I could if I can convert it in my head. I can't. I'm just not that good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the Apple here. I'm sorry, up to the Photoshop here. And I'm going to go down to Preferences. Now, I'm using an Apple computer. If you were using a PC computer, that's either found in Files or Edit. I'm not exactly sure which one. I apologize that I don't. But it'll be in one of those, and you'll go down, you'll find Preferences. I believe it's in File, and you go down to Preferences. But here I want to go to Preferences, and I want to go down to, and the preference window or menu is exactly the same on both. And I want to go down to Units and Rulers. And once here, you can see that unit of measure here is millimeters. I can change this to inches and press OK. And so now when I make my drawing, you notice that it is in inches now instead of millimeters. So I want to deselect this because I want to draw a new one. So I'm going to go up here to Selection, and I can go down to Deselect. Notice that I can press the hotkey, Command or Control D, depending on which computer you're using. So I wanted to, the book shows you to sort of go from here to here, and you want it roughly 3/4 inches wide, which is 0.75. And you want it to be 2.25 tall, which is 2.5. So you can see that going from here, if I don't start in the correct area, it's going to be difficult to get that exact size. So by starting from the middle and working your way out, it's a little difficult. What you can do is start down at this corner and work the opposite way. So now I can go to, and we're looking for roughly here, you don't have to get exact, but I'm going for 7.5. and 2 and 2.5. So you can see as I move, it's coming closer, and I'm almost 2.5, pretty close there. And I want to move it up to 0.75, and I'm just going over a little bit more, right there. And that's the exact size that we want right there. So once we have this selection, you want to select the brush in the panels menu, and that's over here, and come up to the brush. Now there's two of them. You have a history brush here and you have a brush here. So don't get confused. The history brush has a little arrow going through it, and the brush is just this one here. And again, if you hover over it, it'll say brush tool. You can also just press B as the shortcut, which is a little bit faster. Once you get the brush, we want a soft round, change it to 65. So the way that you can do that is in the image window, if you right click, you'll see that this comes up, and this is your brush panel. And you can click any place outside and it disappears. You can also get the same thing by going up here and pressing this down arrow by the brush panel here. And that will also get you the brush panel. But in this case, they want you to do it inside the panel. You right click, and that gives us our little mini window for the brushes. We want the brush to be about 65 pixels, adjusted down to roughly 65. You see I'm not exact. And then we're going to close it off. We want it to be a soft round. We're going to close it off. And so now I can paint, I'm going to paint the foreground color, which is this blue right here. And I can paint any place on here, and it's not going to show up. You see, if I press, if I left click and start painting, nothing shows up. But as I go past that area that's marked out by my selection, you'll see that I can paint inside here. So all I want to do is just paint all inside here and fill that all in with the blue. When you're using a brush tool, you want to make sure that the opacity is 100 and the flow is at 100. So that way it all fills in pretty quick, and make sure that's normal. We can change the modes here. We'll talk about that later on. But you want to make sure it's normal. So it should all be set up to the same settings that I have right here. And then once you're done there, you want to go ahead and deselect so that we get rid of these marching ants here. Again, go to select, go down to deselect, or Command D again would also get us the same thing. And now we have our blue bar that we're going to make into a ribbon, like this one that's up here a little bit. I'll move this so that we can compare the two, and we can see that. So the next thing we're going to learn about is selecting hidden tools. So let's go on up here. The next tool that we want to use is the polygonal lasso tool, and that's located in the lasso tool group right here. And if I left click and hold it down, I can see that I have a lasso tool, a polygonal lasso tool, and a magnetic lasso tool. Now there are a couple different ways that I can select this. I can just click on that one, and I can alt click or option click on it, and each time I click on that I have another one selected. And the other way is that I can shift L, and that will also go through those selections. And again, that shift L comes from, you can see that the hot tool or the hotkey is L right there. By going shift L, we select through it. When we select L, L will just select that tool, whatever it is. But if we do shift L, that selects through the tool, so we can select the one that we want. Once you have this tool, the idea is that you're going to create a ribbon just like the one that's above. So the way you're going to do that is we'll go down here and we'll click right on the, you can click on this corner, but I like to go a little bit past it. Click on the corner, and you see that we have a circle up here around the bottom of our symbol on our cursor. Now as I drag that, I can drag a line into my work here, and I get it about the center, and that's in between in this bar. Center it up in the bar. I'm going to click again, left click on my mouse, and now that's going to create a junction point where this can come off of. I'm going to go down through that corner, make sure that I select and click, left click here, so I create another point. And then as I come back up here, you see as I get close, I'm going to get a circle, and when I click on that, now I have my selection. Now it doesn't matter what it looks like here, all that matters is that it comes in here and comes through this corner, through that corner, and a point about center. If you're not perfectly center, don't worry about that, that's fine, not going to hurt anything. Now I want to delete the colors that are inside that particular selection, and I'm on my ribbon, so it's going to delete whatever's on this ribbon layer right here. It's not going to delete anything that's below it. So I'm just going to press my delete key, and that's going to get rid of that, and I'm going to go up to the top and selection, and then deselect that, and now I've just made my ribbon like we have that one. Now mine goes a little deeper, but that's okay. You can make yours to match that if you'd like, but this is my project, so I'll make it a little bit different. Next thing we're going to do is set tools and properties in the option bar. And again, each tool that you use, the option bar changes, so we're going to look at that. So the tools panel over here, I'm going to go to this T tool right here, and this is horizontal text right here. You got a vertical text, a vertical type mask tool, horizontal type mask tool, and we got a vertical type tool and a horizontal type tool. We want the horizontal type tool is what we want. And I'm going to come over here and notice that our cursor changed to this bar inside this selection. And notice that we also, up at the top here, that this menu has changed here. So what we want to do is we want to select the type of lettering that we're going to use in our text tool. So the book used what's called a Minion Pro Italics. And you see that we have Minion Pro here, and we have italics, so that's pretty much the standard one that comes with it. And it's a 32 font, and we are a 32 point font, and we have that selected here already. Now there's a couple ways to change this font. You can click on this and you can go down here and select a font that you want, and notice that it goes from 30 to 36. There's no 32 there. The other way that you can select font size is you can just type it in. I can just type in 36 if I want it to be bigger, and press enter, and I got 36 font. The other way is that notice that when I move my cursor over the text tool or any of these tools here that allow you to change things with typing, numbers, combination, you have a scrubber here. And the scrubber, if I go to the left, makes it smaller, and if I go to the right, makes it larger. And again, to select this scrubber, what I'm doing is I'm left clicking, holding it down, and I'm moving left or right to make it what I want. So you can adjust this to get the correct one that you want, or the correct number. Now sometimes it's a little difficult. I find it just easier just to type in the number, and again we're going to go back to 32 points here. Now we're going to come down to our bar, and this is where we want to put our text. And you can type any place in here. Just click on it and it will change it to a text tool, and you notice that it highlights it there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in my name. The book says to type in Elaine, but I'm going to type in my name, that way I know it's my card. And I typed in John. We don't have to worry about where the text is positioned because we can change that later on, and we don't have to worry about the fact that the text basically uses the foreground color over here, which you notice the foreground color is also up here, and you notice the foreground color is exactly the same as it is right here. And we're not going to worry about that because we're going to fix that right now. The next section talks about using panels and panel menus. Now, because the text is the same color, we're going to make sure that our horizontal tool is selected again. And the horizontal tool, if we drag it across this X section right here, we can highlight it. Now notice that if I move away, my horizontal tool changes. But if I come back next to my text, it changes to this bar. And once it's that bar, that means I can highlight that text that's there, although it's invisible because it's the same color. So I'm just going to left click and hold and drag across here and highlight my text there. Once my highlight is highlighted across that full name, I can click on the swatches up here, and that's this little panel right here. If the swatches aren't up here, again you can go to Windows and you go down to swatches and click on that, and that will make them appear. But I clicked on my swatches up here, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to select a yellow, and the book selects a yellow that is roughly right about here. Now these are going to change depending on what colors you use or what swatch patterns you have, but we're going to go with pastel yellow, I think, and I think that's the one the book chose. And now you notice that my name appears there, and you can see it now because we've changed the color of that name. So notice that my color now appears, and the color, the actual text color, has changed. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my menus option panel here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this check mark, and this check mark is going to accept that, and you notice that now John. Now with that color selected, you notice that over here our foreground color is changed to that yellow. Now there are other ways to look at this swatch panel up here in this corner, and we click on this little drop down menu here, and you see that we can have small thumbnails, small list, large list. So what we're going to do here is we're going to select the small list, and we have the same colors, but now they have the different color names next to them, so that sort of gives you a little more reference here. And what we want to do is we want to go down to light yellow orange. So I'm just going to use the wheel on my mouse to rotate that down to light yellow orange, pastel, and let's see, light yellow orange right here. I'm going to click on that color, and notice that it changed my color right away. It just changed the name on there to the light yellow, and we're going to go ahead and accept that color. So and it changed that light color for us automatically without us having to really do much of anything. Notice here that we have a text layer. Anytime you use the text tool, you create a new text layer over here. So that's what we're currently working on, is that text layer. Now we really didn't want this color here, so actually Photoshop has a couple different ways that we can undo that. And we're going to go up to undo layer here. So what we want to do is we want to go up to edit and undo set character style, and we're going to click on that, and notice that we've changed it back to that yellow, which is what we really wanted to do. Now the other way that you can do that is you can put Control Z or Command Z on Mac to undo and edit. And when we did that, of course, the name returned to the previous color, which is what we want. The undo command in Photoshop only undoes the last step, which is practical because we could have a lot of steps there. So our next thing, now that we've gone back to the correct colors, we really want to move that name to where it's about center. So in order to do that, I want to make sure that my text layer is still selected. I'm going to go up here to my move tool. I'm going to click on that, and notice that we have this square box that appears around my name. So I can click anywhere inside the box, left click and hold down, And now I can move that box any place I want. So notice that if I move it at a certain point, I get some pink lines, and that tells me that's centered up inside that. Now as we move it around, we're going to see some pink lines appear, and these tell us that we're centered on stuff. And sometimes it's kind of touchy to get it exact, but there I'm centered in my ribbon there, and I'm going to let go, and now this is centered directly into the ribbon. So now that we have this centered up here, we have basically our finished picture. And if I click over here into this one, you see that it looks almost identical to the one that I have, except mine is John, this one is Elaine. But now we have our picture finished. We have our 4 layers that we worked on here, and we just want to go ahead and save this again. Now I'm going to save it as, and this time I had working last time, and this time I'm going to save it as card. Or you can put finish card or card finish, but that's the way I'm going to label mine, just so I know. So now we have our first chapter pretty much done as to what we are supposed to work on, but the chapter also talks a little bit more about some of the panels and gives you some information about that. And let's talk about that a little bit. Now a lot of times you don't need to use all of the panels in Photoshop, and so you can hide them, or you can customize it as much as you want. So if you want to move an entire panel, you can click on the name here and just print it out and move that panel out to wherever you want to have it. So you see the properties now is separated from the adjustment, and the adjustment is over here. If I want to bring that properties back, I click on the tab here, I bring it in until that becomes blue. You see the blue line that's all around, and I let go, and now it's back underneath that panel. If I want to close the entire panel, I can click on that, and that's going to close that entire panel out, and that panel is gone now. Notice that the properties panel is completely gone. If I want that panel back, I can go up to Windows and come down here to Properties, click on that, and now my Properties panel appears back over into this group. I can also change what group I want. Let's say I want the adjustment panels down here with my layers. I can bring that down and put it in with my layer panel down here if that's where I want it. I don't, so I'm going to bring that back on up here and just leave it up there. Go back to my layers panel there. So again, we talked about you can expand or contract the panels, and that's one way of doing it. So I can bring them all closed here, and I can just click on the panel that I want to use at the time that I need it. Here's my properties panel. When I want it there, my adjustments. Click on my layers, my layer panel comes here. I can also extend the size so that I can see the entire panel here. So again, that's just ways of, if you're working in your main image here, you want to have more room over there, you can make these panels larger or smaller. To change the height of panels, we can drag them up or down, and again, that will only go so far. If you want to completely close the panel out, you double click on it and then double click again, and that gives you the minimum amount to look at when you click on them and open them. Notice that this one is a little bit larger. If I go back to my adjustments, I double click here, notice the panel is small. I double click, a single click, it opens up the panel, and it gives it my panel. This panel still has a lot left underneath. Notice when I drag this bar here that we have a lot left underneath it. And you just got to remember that on some of these panels it doesn't show you everything. Sometimes you have to open it up quite a bit to see everything that is in that panel. So it just depends on how much you want to see or how much you need to see. So that's our properties. Notice that the properties, because this is a type, it has a lot more properties than, let's say, this panel would. Notice that this panel doesn't have nowhere near the amount of properties in it that the text panel does. So they can be quite large. These panels can be quite large depending on what the panel is or what the layer is that you're on. Now, if you bring out panels here and you have them floating, you can make them larger or smaller. So you can, make them as small as that, or let's say you need a larger panel, you can make them much bigger. It's just entirely up to you. You can make any adjustments you want on them. Let me just get this floating panel back in there. There we are. And you can see that when I brought that panel back in, it's still as large as it was. So most of the time you want to bring them down close to where they were before you drag them back into the area that you want them to be in. The tools panel is a little bit different. You can drag that to be in different spots if you want. Wherever you want to use them at, you can drag them over there. But the tool panel cannot be grouped with other tool panels or option bar with other panels. So this one and this one here cannot be put over in these panels. They can be moved around a little bit. I don't think you can. So the tools panel can be moved. The option bar panel cannot. But the tool panel, just because you move it doesn't mean that I can't take and combine this panel. I can delete the tool panel off there, but I can't combine it with another one. So this tool panel, if I bring it on over here, you'll see that it can't combine with any of these other panels here. It has to be on its own. So it has to have its own little area to work with. You can't resize the tool panel or option bar, and you cannot stack the tool panel or option bar in the panels dock. So that gets us through the first chapter in the book, basically just discovering what we're going to work with in Photoshop, all of the panels and the options that we have and the tools that we can use and the hidden tools, and discover hidden tools and hidden menus. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please do subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next chapter.